Good day. We're looking in this lesson at law of demand. Law of demand. I'm using the online tool Nearpod, the online tool. So I'll be presenting my lectures online by means of this tool, and I want my students to access these slides from their devices. And for them to do so, they need to input a code. A code. I have logged in as myself to be a student following this lesson on the student device, whether it's a laptop or a mobile phone. Here I've logged in a different browser um, and here you can see this is what the student will see on his or her device. So let's go back to the main slides, and here I am as myself. The student names are shown by the teacher. Well, the teacher can see all the students that have accessed the lesson. Right, let's continue. Our objectives are demand and law of demand. These are the two objectives for this lesson. We're starting with the key terms. Key terms: demand, law of demand, demand schedule, and ceteris paribus, the four key terms in this lesson. Okay, so let's begin with a starting activity. So I want to know what the students already know about demand. So I'll be giving them some key concepts and some images that they have to match up. Okay, so let's have a look. So this is what appears on the teacher's screen. The teacher will start the activity pressing this button. Students will have in this case, 1 minute and 15 seconds to complete this activity. So let me start the activity. Let me go look at the student screen. So this is what the student will see, this matching task. So the student will see in this task some terms and some images that they have to match up. So let me just do 1 or 2. Okay, and these two are correct. So that is reflected as a tick mark. Let me do another one. Let's see. Right, this one and that one. So this activity, the students will go through, the time will elapse, and the teacher can follow on the teacher's screen these as the students are working through, and the students' effort will appear as follows. Right, let's carry on now with our first task for this lesson. First task is a paragraph which provides a brief overview of demand. There are some missing words in this paragraph that describe demand, and I want my students to complete the task by filling in the missing words. Okay, so let's just wait for the screen to load, and here we are. Right, so let me go back to the student side, and here we see there's a paragraph with some missing words about demand that student will have to complete to help them in understanding demand. So let's begin by saying demand is defined as a quantity of a product that consumers are willing and able to buy at different prices. Okay, so again, this is an activity that the students will complete. Let me go back to teachers, the teacher's slides. Right, so that was task number one. Let's go on to our task number two. On task number two, we've got an activity. Um, this activity is notional demand and effective demand. Okay, notional and effective demand. So I'm going to give my students 10 minutes to complete this activity. So let me start. Okay, so the students will have 10 minutes to do this task on notional or ineffective demand and effective demand, and giving them this website that they may want to use to help them in this task. So if I go back to the student slide, so the student will see the instruction here. They may want to use this website to help them. So they will start maybe by describing, number one, the difference between notional and effective demand. So, for example, they may see notional demand refers to demand where a consumer is interested in buying. And let's say effective demand is about demand where a consumer is able to purchase a product. Okay, so this is what the student may want to enter. For number two, make a list of 5 goods or services that you as a student want to buy. Next to each of these, write down whether it's a notional demand or an effective demand. And number 3, briefly explain why you decided that way. Okay, so that is what the student will do, and then when they finish, they will submit the answers. So again, let me go back to the teacher's screen. Okay, so the time will elapse, the time will show, and at the end of this task, teacher may want to look at what the students have entered and maybe want to comment on their answers. Right, let's go on. Let's have a look at our next activity. Okay, so again, I'll be giving my students in this activity 10 minutes. Let me go again to this student screen. So on this task, we're looking at a newspaper headline, and this activity is about ceteris paribus. This newspaper headline, falling prices, ceteris paribus, may result in an increase in the demand for electric vehicles. And there is a diagram. This diagram is about electric vehicle sales in China, in millions of vehicles sold for the time period 2016 to projected 2028. So this is just a graph showing the change in electric vehicle sales over this time period. Okay, so then question number 1 this activity on ceteris paribus. Describe any four factors that could affect the demand for electric vehicles. So if we have a look at number one, um, the demand for electric vehicles may be affected by charging points for electric vehicles. That would be one of the factors that affect uh, of the demand for electric vehicles. Let me say the number of charging points that are available for electric vehicles. Another one could be government intervention to perhaps increase the use of electric vehicles. That could possibly be another factor that affect the demand for electric vehicles. Question number two would be, why do economists use the ceteris paribus assumption? So the aim of this activity is students will, in their short research, they will come up and they will discover any number of factors that will affect the demand for electric vehicles. So um, they will then maybe, if they think a bit further, they would perhaps come with a conclusion that studying all these various factors and focusing on just one or two may be a little difficult. So they may or they may not arrive at the conclusion that ceteris paribus is an assumption that an economist would make to isolate and focus on one or two aspects of an economic phenomena to help them in their analysis of an economic phenomenon. Okay, so this is just sort of an open-ended question to help students identify and focus on this concept of ceteris paribus, which is ignoring all other factors and focusing on one or two aspects of a particular economic um, concept. Okay, so back in the teacher's slides. So when this activity is completed, again, the teacher may want to have a look at the student answers and maybe discuss their answers. Okay, so let's go on to our next task for this lesson. And in this task, we're looking at law of demand. So there's a diagram that illustrates law of demand. And there are some questions about law of demand. Okay, so the questions here. Number one, identify the two elements that appear in this diagram. Price and demand is number two. Is there a positive or negative relationship between price and demand? Okay, let's say negative relationship. Okay, and so on. So again, the students will submit their answers. Okay, and again, the teacher may want to look at the individual answers of the students and maybe want to discuss it. So in this case, there are the answers for maybe the students to review if they did not get their answers correct. Right, so task number 5. Task number 5, we're looking at a higher level type activity. What are some of the reasons for this negative relationship? So in the previous activity, the students will have realized that there is a negative relationship between pricing and quantity demanded. Two of these reasons are the income effect and the substitution effect. Income effect, that is the income of consumers, their wages, their earnings, what they earn. If there's a change in price, it will follow that the quantity of goods that consumers are able to afford will change. Whether the price of the goods have gone up, then they will have uh, they'll be they'll be able to spend less on that activity. Or when if the price has gone down, prices have gone down, then consumers' earnings, um, uh, assuming consumers' earnings remain the same, they will be able to spend more. The substitution effect, that is substituting one product for another product, similar types of products, product X and the product Y, and how the quantity demanded of one product will be affected by the let's say an increase in the price of a similar or a substitute good. Okay, so that may be uh, uh, these are two of the reasons for that negative relationship. So if we look at the next slide, we'll see uh, diagrams explaining this here. When there's an increase in the price, quantity demanded will be less. Okay, and that is known as a contraction. This movement is along the demand curve. And the opposite is true. When the price of a product decreases, the quantity demanded for that product is likely to increase, ceteris paribus, and this is known as an extension of demand movement along the line of demand. So here we have another task where I want my students to draw a graph. Let me go back to the student slide to draw a graph which shows contraction and extension of demand. So students will have 3 minutes to draw, say, price, let's say quantity, demanded. Okay, students may draw a line and then they may indicate um, let's say, contraction and extension. Okay, so this may be what students may be able to do within this limited time frame. They'll submit their answer. Okay, then again the teacher will see that a student has entered an answer. Okay, so if we go on to the next slide, so here I'll be showing them what the answer could look like, what the answer would look like. A graph with the two axes labeled and contraction and extension indicated there. So it's just a little bit of practice for the students on these two terms, contraction, extension, indicating a price increase and a price decrease. Okay, so let's go on to our final activity for this lesson, where we'll be looking at demand schedule. Demand schedule. So again, let me go and have a look on the student slide. There's a table that shows an example of a demand schedule for some meals. Okay, so there's a demand schedule. We've got pricing in the one column, quantity on the other column. We've got quantity demanded at various price levels. Okay, so the student enters, types in the answers. Question number one, how many meals consumers willing and able to buy at price of 300? Price of 300, able to buy 10 meals, and so on. So when the student is finished, they will submit their answers. Okay, the teacher will see students and the answers of the students. Okay, again, so in this case, again, I'll allow my students to actually see what the correct answers would be. Okay, so in this case, there are actual correct answers, the number of meals, the pricing, and so on. Right, so here we've come to our plenary, the end of the lesson. So at the end of the lesson, we're looking, in this case, at 3 slides, definitions, some images, and a little multiple choice game. Okay, so if we have a look, we'll see. So demand, a definition of demand, law of demand, a definition of law of demand, and these images reflect demand and law of demand. Okay, so if you go on to the next slide, we have some gift moving images. Okay, and what the student will see. Let me go to the student slide. Okay, so this is what the student will see here. If I just go back to the teacher's slide. Just go back. No, I don't want. But the requirement for the students would be that they need to identify. Okay, they need to identify these 6 moving images. They need to name them. Okay, the instruction there was they need to maybe get a pen and paper to write them down, or perhaps they could type in on their devices. They could type in number 1. Okay, if we look at number 1, that would be extension of demand, which follows a decrease in pricing. Image number 2, all other things equal, that would be the ceteris paribus assumption. Right, so these 6 images is what the students will have to identify. Just a recap. Okay, so if we move on next, so again, I'm giving the answers here for the students. The 6 images identified there. Okay, so our last activity for this lesson would be this. It's a type of game, with some multiple choice answers. Multiple choice answers. Okay, and then go to the students. On the student screen, this is what they will see. They need to join the game. Okay, so there, as a student, I have joined the game, and the teacher and start the game. So if we go back to the student slide, that's question number one. The demand for a good increases when the price of a substitute also rises. Okay, so that would be correct. So these questions will appear, the students will enter them when the consumer's income rises. Their demand for a good is likely to increase. Okay, so these questions will appear, and at the end, um, the teacher will be able to see all the answers. Okay, so this is just a, a brief look at a possible lesson on law of demand. Law of demand in the IB syllabus. Thank you very much.